So this panel is business models supporting open source, which is a big, important topic, and we could go down a number of paths here, and some of them spicier than others. But open source is obviously very important. We're here at the main stage, the open source stage, and hats off to the organizers for allowing the attention on the importance of open source, and this now being the second year in a row that we've been able to do that. So I wanted to start with quick intros, and then we'll get into why. First, that'll be the first question, but let's start with you, Thunder.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm thunderbiscuit. I'm a freelance Bitcoin developer. I own a small company called Coyote Bitcoin, and for the past few years, I've been a contributor to the Bitcoin Development Kit, which is an open source library to basically enable anyone building wallets. And for the past year, my work on the Bitcoin Development Kit has been funded by Spiral.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Justin. I go by Jevy on Twitter. I work at Unchained as a product manager on our platform team, so helping to develop our product offerings specific to our Bitcoin infrastructure, managing our open source libraries. I've been in the space now for a few years. Prior to that, I was a product manager elsewhere, previously also a freelance photographer, a long history in doing tech support and helping users resolve pain points.
Hey, I'm Vivek, or you could say Vic, or Seardsalmon. I'm a VP of Business Development at Coinkite, and I was previously at Blockstream. Yeah.
So I think we start with why first. The world runs on open source. I think everyone, every day, interacts with open source technology, and most likely doesn't realize they do. But why? Why is contributing to open source important?
I guess we should touch on ECDSA and Schnorr itself. So we have a signature library in Bitcoin called SecP256K1. And when Bitcoin originally came out, we were using ECDSA because Schnorr had a patent. Now, I want to say in 2021, we had the Taproot activation, and only now are we starting to touch on some wonderful signature primitives where we can linearly combine signatures, so verification of the signature is much more efficient. When things are open source, you never really know how people are going to use it, and it's wonderful. It's like let 1,000 flowers bloom type of deal. And I think as Bitcoin companies, we're a little blessed. It's almost like the reverse of Wall Street, where we privatize the losses and socialize the gains because we have Bitcoin on our balance sheets.
Yeah, I think what we have observed in the opening of Bitcoin and kind of the last 15 years of development in that area is that creating something that is open source allows for a lot of different entities to be able to coalesce around a shared idea. And more than anything, as Bitcoiners, we recognize the value of operating as free markets. We want Bitcoin to succeed in fair competition with other monetary networks. And as a result, we see open source development as a way of being able to share in the opportunities that this protocol provides us, ensuring that there's interoperability and that no one entity is being kind of creating an artificial moat around their opportunities just because they happen to have a good idea first.
And it might be worth just diving a little bit deeper on Unchained's activity, because you guys have built open source libraries, you've got Caravan. In addition to actually doing that and there being a business need for why you did it, there also are benefits that accrue to you as
right.
well.
Yeah, so early on, Unchained when Unchained was getting started, a lot of the open source libraries that you now see, especially coming from BDK and others, simply didn't exist, and there weren't a lot of existing businesses that were looking to solve these effectively institutional grade problem sets. Our co-founders, Joe Kelly and Drew Bonsall, saw the need to try and remain as close to the bare metal of Bitcoin as possible and facilitating these financial services that allow for clients to be able to keep one foot in the legacy world and start to move into the Bitcoin space. And in developing our open source libraries and grounding our whole infrastructure on those platforms, we not only make it easier to ensure that we are remaining kind of interoperable and compatible with the network, but it also ensures to our clients they have the opportunity to not need to trust us, and as a result, they can trust us more in providing solutions, as you mentioned, like Caravan, which was kind of a stateless precursor to what many are now familiar with Sparrow Wallet, which is another fantastic piece of open source software. We wanted to allow for our clients to take their multi-sig quorum information and their 2 keys and to not be entirely dependent upon our website continuing to remain live and operable. And so they could then take all that information at a moment's notice and go entirely on their own sovereign recovery path.
Yep.
I think I want to mention that a big part of opening source code is about security. Like, the more people use your library, the more safe people feel about using it. And so libraries that are, first of all, closed source tend to be dangerous just from, like, people don't know about them. And then if you're one of the first few people to find a bug, then you can, like, leverage that to a clear advantage. Whereas libraries like, for example, the Bitcoin Development Kit sees, like, a lot of review, a lot of eyes on the code, a lot of users, and that feeds back into the mechanisms. And now that we have commercial partners, like people who are actually building, a production application with our libraries, then they have a huge incentive to review the code, but they don't need permission to do that. They just...
It also creates its own quasi-funnel in a way. If you're trying to attract good engineering talent, many engineers are excited about the opportunity to work on open source software, or to at least work for a company that sees the value proposition of open source coding. And we've even seen that with some of the talent that we've attracted because of that initial platform that we decided to build.
And I'd also say the engineering talent inspires even other companies outside of the Bitcoin industry. For example, our core developers have championed deterministic builds with Geeks. That's really growing in popularity versus the previous methods because of potential tooling issues where it becomes very difficult to verify the actual dependencies used.
Yeah, Vic, why don't you talk more about just Coinkite and PSBTs and experience that Coinkite has had with that?
Sure. So PSBT is partially signed Bitcoin transactions, BIP 174. I believe it was written by this prolific core dev and maintainer an ex-colleague of mine, Andy Chow. This was a way to basically create, partially put together, finalize, and broadcast a Bitcoin transaction. This kind of came out but didn't really receive much love. And after that, NVK and Doc Hex, the co-founders of Coinkite, really ran with it and decided to make the cold card to get adoption for this BIP, which they thought was revolutionary. So over time, it's grown in adoption. Now we see it in really cool places. For example, in L&D with Boss and other stuff like that, they also use PSBTs. I'm a bit impartial because even before I've joined Coinkite, I was almost like a developer advocate, just handing these out so we can get more integrations. So I think it really pushes the ball forward in Bitcoin, and back to Jevy's point, it really helps like the interoperability and things of that nature. And we as the consumers all benefit.
So there's different, I mean, this panel is called Business Models Supporting Open Source. There's different ways to do it. Unchained's building specific libraries and an open source multi-sig coordinator in Caravan that serves business needs, but also provides customers, redundancy if they want to be able to, take possession of their Bitcoin and not have reliance on Unchained. Coinkite was a big advocate, as Vic was saying, in PSBT adoption. There's a completely different model here where you could have, Spiral supporting BDK, which you're involved in, and that's done on a, more of like a foundation slash a charitable model, nonprofit model that's not oriented around a specific business objective. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, it is. I think it is. The Bitcoin development kit is a bit of a special horse in this situation because a lot of open source libraries are started by commercial interests. So organizations, companies will have a requirement for a particular software and they'll open source their software. For us, it was a bit different. It was like developer driven. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of different actors in the space realized the requirement for it. If you want to build Bitcoin wallets, either server side or my expertise is on mobile, it's very difficult to do. You got to go and play with the primitives. And a lot of people were needing this sort of like easy interface to use. Like you don't necessarily want to deal with all the complexity, but at the same time, if you need a taproot address, like you want it now. And so it'd be great if you could have a library that sort of like helped you with that and allowed you to build whatever you're good at. And so, and for us, it's not just Spiral. Brink has also been a donor, but it did require sort of like a different approach, and it's working well so far. And I'm sort of like here soft announcing a little bit that the Bitcoin development kit is in the process of creating a foundation that will be a nonprofit registered in the state of Tennessee, and this will allow organizations, companies, or whatever to make donations directly to the foundation.
Yeah, it's really been two sides of the coin for the most part, and that's been either private businesses that see the value proposition of open source and want to take the time and effort to build out these libraries that solve their own needs, and then maybe there's an opportunity for others to take advantage of that. The other that's more common seemingly is the small or independent developer that creates a novel idea, wants to share that out, and then creates kind of their own small following around that. And they're very dependent upon the generosity of contributors, and not only contributors to the code base in terms of providing additional feature additions, but also users that see the value of being able to leverage this open source software and want to then share their financial contributions. And so BDK feels like it's kind of found this middle ground of recognizing that pain point and being able to find businesses that want to provide grant funding to allow for those opportunities to thrive and make sure that there is a healthy environment for those opportunities to move forward.
Sometimes donations also come in the shape of time. Mm-hmm. We don't think about that, but a lot of libraries don't necessarily require at all angles a full-time developer or multiple full-time developers. It can be multiple things that need to be done. There's documentation, there's examples, and so it's a common practice to sometimes offer time, developer time or engineer time. Say this particular engineer is very familiar with the library, we'll give him 10 hours a week to work on this library, and that's part of something that private companies can do to help. For example, BDK, it doesn't need to be money, but it can be, say, Unchained said, we're big users of BDK, well, we'll dedicate a few hours of one of our engineers per week, and it's a set, and that engineer is given responsibilities within the library. And
there's a beautiful feedback loop to this, because they'll donate to BDK, and BDK will get some Rust bindings and JavaScript or Swift or something like that. And then the open source libraries will actually create new business models we haven't thought of for new startups. And then after that, they may be successful, who knows, maybe acquired or go public, and they'll donate back to BDK. Mm-hmm. So it's a beautiful ecosystem that's just blossoming and spiraling.
Yeah, the example I was going to point to, some of you might have been in here earlier today during the Seed Signer workshop, but Keith Mackay was talking about some of the contributions that they have been receiving in terms of time to that project. They had a UX designer who contributed their time in creating an entirely new UX for their platform. Newton Nick was another developer who basically did an entire revamp of their entire code base when he came on early on. And both of these people have full-time jobs. They're not able to commit a ton of time, but they see the value and they're excited about the concept that's being built and they want to be able to contribute to it. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to provide value back to a given project. It isn't necessarily always in the form of financial contributions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that concept of contributing time, and I think you could even relate an individual's contribution in their own time as its own business model, if you will, for an individual. If they're not getting paid, they decide they want to contribute to a project or contribute to something that they care about, there's going to be a lot of benefits that will come to them over time from doing that. So that in itself is a business model. They build up a network, they build credibility, and then that might result in them getting a full-time role.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's almost like a portfolio per se.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thunder, you've been on the receiving end of, you're a grantee. What's your perspectives on that? Like, what do you view as most important for creating effective and sustainable contributions from a funding side to fund open source development?
Well, that's a big one. I mean, I've been super lucky. This is going to be my second year, starting soon, and there's different approaches, I think, to these ideas. But certainly, one of Spiral's the approach that Spiral takes is that they hope to fund a developer for a certain amount of time, but eventually that they can go on and work on their own or find work and be funded. So they don't want to be the sole funder, for example, of some of these libraries and whatnot, and also attract, sort of continue and create this snowball effect, right, where we go and get our own funding elsewhere, or like the organizations that they kickstart end up flying on their own. Part of that is the foundation, for example, for the Bitcoin Development Kit that we're building. Another aspect that we're doing for the foundation for the Bitcoin Development Kit is we're also open sourcing. This is not my work, by the way. This is Steve Meyer's work, but he's been open sourcing a lot of the process that's required to create one of these foundations. So if you're not familiar with it, it can be a daunting task, and you need a bit of understanding of what it works, and the lawyers and the accountant, and you need a board and whatnot. And this can be complex, but at the same time, the return on it is probably worth it. And so, but if you want, you can find our work certainly is going to be made public. And so we're making sure that other organizations that are interested in building that sort of thing and creating foundations so as to help direct funds can do that easily and maybe follow our lead, for example. Another thing that the foundations provide, they tend to create situations where money has clarity. So where does it go, what happens to it, and produce a bit of longevity as opposed to just funding like single individuals. You're saying it's not just a single person. And to your point, you were saying there's a lot of guys who have full-time jobs, right? Not everybody's interested. Actually, if you speak to companies that make donations or even to Spiral, you'll find that it's not actually that easy to find talent. There's a lot of people who take money, but to find really good talent who is interested in taking a year and taking these grants. And in some cases, some of these developers, very talented developers, can make more money on the private sector. And so there's a bit of you need to do it for the love of the software often. So.
Well, in the open source code base, often what we're looking at here is kind of the backbone, the architecture of how people can build products on top of the existing protocol. And certainly at Unchained, our primary mission is to act as navigators to help guide people through their Bitcoin journey and resolve pain points as they arrive. More than anything, what allows for businesses to differentiate themselves is how they resolve those pain points, how they provide service to those clients. And that's ultimately what people are paying for. What they want is to have someone that can take these complex technical machineries and distill them down into a solution that allows for them to more easily go about their day, not have it be this complex task that they have to dig into and work out how they go from point A to point B every single time. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of legacy finance systems have succeeded so well, is because they've obfuscated a lot of the complexities away from the customer, and done so by creating a moat around their environment. This is the problem that we've had with payment systems like Venmo or PayPal or Cash App, is that for the longest time, once you onboarded into one of them, the way that they tried to maintain their competitive edge was to force you to stay siloed in their environment, and that they would attract other users to their platform because you would already be there, and you would tell your other friends or whoever you're transacting with to use that same silo. And now you see what's happened with Cash App forcing the hand of these other payment systems by offering native Bitcoin deposits, withdrawals, and purchases. And slowly that is seeping into these other business models. But trying to set up a moat in that regard is inevitably going to fail. It's just a matter of time. And so by building and leveraging open source software, you can ensure that you are joining a ever-growing population of users, and your addressable market is the entire world as a result.
Cannot emphasize that as any greater. Venmo absolutely buckled and caved to Cash App by adding Bitcoin, and then now you can, I believe, also send it externally. So it's great to see businesses, that are more open, also force the hands of the ones that are closed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very powerful concept. I think we have a new open source money, right? And I think it's just logical that open source contributions, open source development, open source applications go hand in hand with open source money. I think we're running close on time here, so we can go down the line and end with final thoughts from everyone.
Should I go first?
Please.
Yeah. Final thoughts. I'd say, keep understanding. It's important that as users of software and users of everyday, products, that you ask for the companies that you support, that they in turn support the software that's being built. So you might have a disconnect there where you might know the products you use on an everyday basis, you know what's on your phone, and you know that Bitcoin Core needs money, or Live BDK needs money, but sometimes we don't know the connection between the two. And from my perspective anyway, I hope to see more of that social status accruing to companies who support these open source projects and whatnot. And I think as time goes on, we'll see that where companies will say, well, we're proud supporters of this and that, or we fund a part-time dev on this thing. And so as users of these tools, demand these things and support them yourselves as well if you're interested.
Yeah, I think, please, yeah. I think that open source software is one of these virtuous cycle machines that as you put that out into the open, it drives an opportunity for somebody potentially on the other side of the world to have a novel idea and to be able to leverage the existing tools that you have built and to build something better on their end. That then accrues a new set of users that would have previously been underexposed to what Bitcoin can offer. And ultimately, this is how adoption increases. Obviously, we have spent a number of years at Unchained. We've done the hard work in building all of these open source products. It would have been nice if BDK was around earlier on, I'm sure, but it all works out in the end. But I also want to end it by just saying, as you see new projects come about that are trying to go the route of open source, play around with them, provide feedback. Contributing money is one thing, contributing your thoughts and your time. Everyone has worthwhile perspective to share, even just as a simpleton user. We want to make sure that we are solving pain points for those who aren't as technically savvy or understanding of how Bitcoin operates. And we do so by letting these developers know about it early on.
I'd like to use my closing remarks to thank all the deep R&D core devs have done for us. We stand on the shoulders of giants. I cannot express how much more excited I am for the future with Frost and Music 2, and now even Miniscript. It's a beautiful blue ocean. There's unforetold fortunes and business models and products that users will use in this decade. And once again, thanks to all the open source devs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.